Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Chapter 161, An Evil Soul. How may I address you, Mr. Ma Tiansheng was currently all smiles. The previous horrible impression that Ling Han had given him was completely swept aside, of course. This was a grand customer that was able to produce alchemical pills close to Earth grade. What other person could do such a thing in the whole of Rain country? Absolutely none. Ling Han. You may address me as young Master Han, Ling Han replied. Ma Tiansheng involuntarily wiped off sweat from his forehead. He did not want to address a young man as young master, even one bit, but Ling Han was indeed a very important customer. If he offended Ling Han and Ling Han decided not to commission the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction off the alchemical pills on his behalf, then he'd really be in deep, deep trouble. Young Master Han. He could only do as Ling Han had said and address him as young master. Then, he said, please follow me. I shall help young Master Han take care of the procedures for registration. All right, Ling Han agreed with a nod. The news that 9 alchemical pills close to Earth grade had appeared at Spirit Treasures Pavilion very quickly reached the ears of the higher-ups. Very soon, an old man dressed in embroidered robes appeared and received Ling Han respectfully. Then, he introduced himself. I am the third elder of this pavilion. My surname is Jia, and my name is Jia Ba Yun. Senior Jia, Ling Han greeted him, raising his clasped hands in respect. This old man was a spiritual pedestal tier elite, and more than deserved his respectful greeting. Young friend, are you intending to auction these foundation building pills here, or directly sell them off to our pavilion? Jia Ba Yun asked. Ling Han smiled faintly, and answered, auction. Such alchemical pills were used to assist one to break through to the next level, so it was of course best to auction them off in order to maximize their price. Jia Ba Yun looked a little disappointed at this. If the foundation building pills were directly sold to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, they'd be able to auction a single pill every few years. Firstly, this would help to increase the reputation of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, and secondly, rare items were always the most expensive. This would allow the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to obtain the highest amount of profit from these foundation building pill. Unfortunately, this brat was not that foolish. However, 9 foundation pills would definitely be auctioned off for an astronomical figure. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be earning more than enough from the commission alone. Young friend, if a customer commissions the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction items, we usually charge a commission fee of 15%. However, because the foundation building pills are much too valuable, I can make the decision to lower the commission fee to 14%. How does that sound? Jia Ba Yun asked, smiling. How ruthless. They actually had such a high commission rate. Lu Yutong was pouting at one side. The value of 9 foundation building pills was definitely above 100 million, and this commission fee of 14% would be over 1 million silver coins, far above the monthly net profit of the Lu clan. However, Jia Ba Yun was already generous enough to actually cut 100,000 out of the commission of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Of course, this was also because the value of the foundation building pill was really too high. All right, Ling Han nodded. Money was not something that he attached a lot of importance to, anyways. Jia Ba Yun smiled, and continued, if you want these foundation building pills to be sold for a good price, the best option would be to auction them over a few auctions. If young friend is not in a hurry to use money, why not use this small scheme? The more the foundation building pills could be sold for, the higher the earnings of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be. Thus, Jia Ba Yun would naturally want to use a scheme that could earn the most profit for the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Ling Han shook his head, and replied, I want them all to be auctioned off in a single auction. Jia Ba Yun was stunned for a moment, then sighed. The pills belonged to Ling Han after all, so even if he was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier, he could only make suggestions and offer advice. To Ling Han, the foundation-building pill was something that he could easily concoct, so he would naturally not care if it would be auctioned off for a good price or a better price. In the end, it would definitely be an astronomical price anyways. Worst-case scenario, he'd concoct a few other alchemical pills close to Earth grade a few days later, and would still be able to earn a lot of money anyways. All right, this is your letter of proof. When the pills are sold, young friend can bring this along with you to withdraw your funds. You may also endorse someone else to do it for you. However, please take note, if the letter of proof is lost, please make sure to immediately report the loss here. Otherwise, if someone else withdrew the money earned without your approval, there is nothing even I can do, Jia Ba-Yun warned. This token was split into half, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Ling Han each held one half. The two halves could be joined together seamlessly. Both Jia Ba-Yun and Ling Han left a handprint on their own half. This would help prevent any possibility of anyone using false identities. Young friend, if you have other such pills in the future, why not come auction them off at our Spirit Treasures Pavilion again? As for the commission fee, it can still be discussed further, Jia Ba-Yun said. All right, Ling Han agreed decisively. Ling Han and his companions left the Spirit Treasures Pavilion right after. As for Fan Dongping, he naturally would not get a good end. Ling Han did not need to worry himself over it. Even if Fan Dongping was a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, his crime involved an exorbitantly high sum of over 100 million. It would be very difficult for him to escape the death sentence. Who asked him to be so greedy? It was already quite late, so Ling Han headed to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, bringing Lu Yutong and Hu Niu with him. The three of them slowly strolled through the streets. Hu Niu ran all over the place. Whether it was lollipops or cotton candy or anything else, as long as it was something new, she wanted to give it a try. Thus, by the time they arrived at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, the sky was already completely dark. Mr. Ling, this way please. Yun Xuanhuan had already been waiting inside, and when she saw Ling Han's figure, she immediately stepped out to receive him. They arrived at a side courtyard. When Yun Xuanhuan pushed open the door and entered, they saw Lady Yan helping out a youth and coming out to receive them. Lady Yan said, "We are honored by your presence, Mr. Ling. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Ling Han looked at the two, and said, "That's all right. It is not convenient for Lady Yan as well, so I understand your difficulty. This should be your son, am I right? He has been sleeping for quite a number of years, so his body should still be very weak." "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Ling," Lady Yan said with a smile. She turned and said to the youth by her side, "Tina, this is your life-saving benefactor. Aren't you going to greet your big brother Ling?" "Big brother Ling," the youth immediately called. His face was extremely pale, and he spoke in a weak voice. "Mr. Ling, this is my son. His name is Yan Tianzhao," Lady Yan introduced to Ling Han. Then she took a look at Lu Yutong, and could not help but smile. Mr. Ling is indeed very fortunate to actually be able to obtain the favor of the princess of the Lu clan. Instantly, Lu Yutong's face reddened, yet her positive impression of Lady Yan improved even further. She liked listening to such words. Come and sit down first." Lady Yan guided the others into the side courtyard. There was already a delicious feast laid out, and around them, there were 8 very beautiful female attendants holding onto lanterns. As the light from these lanterns flickered gently, it was a very uniquely enchanting scene. They all sat down in their respective seats, according to their status as host and guests. Lady Yan naturally took the main seat, and on her left sat her son. Yun Xuanhuan was seated next to him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was seated on Lady Yan's right, with Hu Niu beside him, and lastly, Lu Yutong. "Big sister Lu, you are really pretty," Yan Tianzhao praised. A faint blush rose up on his pale face, as if he was being shy. If it had been a young man saying such words, Lu Yutong would not be very happy. However, firstly, Yan Tianzhao was only a teen around 15 to 16 years old, And secondly, she was elated to be praised like this in front of Ling Han. Thus, her good impression of this youth also improved greatly. Of course, that was the affection that an elder sister had for a younger brother. Ling Han only smiled at this. His eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, and a cold feeling rose up in his heart. This was not fear, but loathing, an extreme kind of loathing. It was as if there was an incomparably evil soul hiding within the body of this youth, causing a deep loathing to inexplicably rise up in his heart. He turned to look at Hu Niu and saw that when the little girl's eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, her little face involuntarily stiffened and she bared her teeth. Obviously, Hu Niu had also sensed the evil nature in him. Ling Han could not help but be immersed in deep thought. The permanent pill would be able to awaken a person who had been trapped in deep slumber. The important thing now was, why had Yan Tianzhao fallen asleep in the first place? From the clues that Lady Yan and Yun Xuanhuan had revealed, Yan Tianzhao should have been sleeping for about 10 years. At that time, had he started sleeping because of some kind of illness? Or had he committed some great crime, which caused an unknown elite martial artist to entrap his spirit and force him to sleep for such a very long time? That was the question. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 162, Yan Tianzhao. Yan Tianzhao kept up a display of bashfulness and would frequently blush throughout their meal. When Lady Yan saw this, she felt both heartache and fondness. This also increased the positive feelings that Lu Yutong and Yun Xuanhuan felt for him, who both doted on him like he was their little brother. But precisely because of his display, the coldness in Ling Han's heart grew even further. But, with the indulgent love that Lady Yan was showing for him, if Ling Han actually declared something like eliminating him at this moment, then she would definitely become hostile on the spot and suppress him like some kind of terrible monster. Ling Han would never underestimate the insane and extreme lengths that a mother would go to for her child. Moreover, this was only an intuitive feeling of his. Unless he had reached a point where he was invincible. Then, as long as he thought so, he would be able to do as he wished, with no need to care for what others would think of his actions. The unfortunate thing was, he was only in the 7th layer of element gathering tier now. Big brother Ling, why do you look a bit moody? Yan Tianzhao suddenly asked Ling Han, a hint of a smile flickering at the corners of his lips, his gaze deep. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face as he asked, what do I have to be moody about? Mr. Ling has Miss Lu to accompany him by his side. How could he possibly be unhappy? Lady Yan pursed her lips in a tender laugh. She was the lady boss of an entertainment business, so she was naturally rather outspoken in her speech. Lu Yutong immediately reddened at her words, but a hint of delight flickered in her eyes. She turned to glance at Ling Han, but when she saw that he looked extremely composed, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. I have not yet congratulated Big Brother Ling. When will you be getting married with Big Sister Yutong? Yan Tianzhao asked in a very innocent-looking manner. This brat was indeed strange. Or so Ling Han thought secretly. When Yan Tianzhao fell asleep, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. Then, now that he was awake, he should only have the limited intelligence of a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and would need to recover for some time before his intelligence would catch up with others within the same age range as he. But, just looking at the way he was speaking now, who would believe that this youth had been asleep for over 10 years? However, Lady Yan, Lu Yutong, and Yun Xuanhuan all did not notice this discrepancy. Even if they had noticed, they'd most likely think that this brat was a genius who could immediately adapt and get used to having a normal life. Then he'd just have to see exactly how strange this brat was. Ling Han smiled. This youth did not even have a sliver of cultivation on him, so why was there need for him to be afraid? He had already mentioned it before. He only sensed a very discomforting feeling from this Yan Tianzhao, as if there was an incomparably evil soul hidden within the youth's body that incited disgust from him. Lady Yan, it's best to serve more food. This little girl is a true glutton, Ling Han said with a laugh, pointing at Hu Niu, who had already begun scarfing down the food. Lady Yan and Yun Xuanhuan were both astonished. How could such a tiny little child have such a terrifyingly huge appetite? It's a good thing to be able to eat, Lady Yan said with a smile. But she can eat too well. I'm about to be driven into poverty by her humongous appetite, Ling Han sighed. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong rolled her eyes at his words. This guy earned over 100 million in a few moments. No matter how big a glutton Hu Niu was, she would not be able to catch up to the rate he was earning money at. And he still dared to moan about being poor. What an actor. With Lady Yan's command, a large amount of food was served one after another. Hu Niu did not refuse any dish, and eventually decided not to use chopsticks anymore but rather her bare hands to grab the food. She moved at such a quick speed that Lady Yan and the others all looked shocked at the speed at which she could eat. They had seen people who could eat a lot, but those who could eat so much, they had definitely never seen before. Yan Tianzhao stared at Hu Niu for a moment longer, and a smile involuntarily appeared on his lips. He was obviously very intrigued by her. However, Hu Niu was a very sensitive little girl, and she immediately raised her head to glare at him. Her gaze was filled with ferocity and killing intent, causing his already pale face to pale a few shades further. Aside from Ling Han, no one else noticed this little episode. Because, just like no one would think that Yan Tianzhao possessed an evil soul, naturally no one would think that such a tiny, little girl like Hu Niu would have any ability to harm others. They would only think that she was a big eater. Yan Tianzhao very quickly discovered Ling Han's gaze on him, and offered up a friendly smile. Meanwhile, Ling Han gave him a very meaningful look, causing the smile on Yan Tianzhao's face to slowly fade and hidden depths to appear in his eyes. This did not look anything like a youth of merely 15 to 16 years old, what more one that had been in a coma for over 10 years and had just been awake for a few days. Please accept this cherishing flower command, Mr. Ling. Lady Yan gifted him with an intricately carved jade plaque that was carved into the shape of a flower. The holder of this plaque would not only be able to enjoy a 20% discount in Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but can also come without any kind of reservations. There are a few side courtyards that have been set aside specifically for extremely honored customers like Mr. Ling. Ling Han received the plaque, smiled and said, "Thank you, Lady Yan." Overall, both hosts and guests quite enjoyed this feast. Of course, the happiest person was definitely Hu Niu. She had eaten so much that her little tummy was slightly rounded. But, when one considered the fact that she had eaten so much food, and yet her tummy was only slightly rounded from the colossal amount she had consumed, it was a practically inconceivable concept. Ling Han now was not so curious about where the food she had consumed had gone. In comparison, the spirit base in the little girl's body was something even more shocking. Lady Yan sent out a carriage to deliver the three of them back to the academy. Yun Xuanhuan did not accompany them this time. Only Lady Yan and Yan Tianzhao escorted them to the door and saw them off. On the carriage, Hu Niu, being a very good eater and a very good sleeper, had already found a comfortable spot in Ling Han's arms and gone to sleep peacefully. In a few moments, a long snoring sound could be heard from her. Lady Yan is really too pitiful. She had to support the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion all by herself and still take care of her comatose child. If I were her, I would most probably have broken down long ago, Lu Yutong said ruefully. Ling Han thought for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever thought about why Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma in the first place? It should have been some kind of inborn illness, right? Something like my 3 yin vanishing veins," Lu Yutong said. And it was exactly this fact that caused her to empathize with Yan Tianzhao and dote on him like a little brother. Then, when he fell into a coma, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. He has just barely woken up and yet can completely behave like a normal person. Isn't that strange? Ling Han asked. Maybe he's a natural-born genius. Lu Yutong paused, then said, "Yi, you seem to be a bit unfond of Tianzhao. I don't like this person." Ling Han did not hide anything. Niu doesn't like to. Hu Niu suddenly awoke, and sat upright on Ling Han's lap, looking extremely serious. Why? Lu Yutong felt a bit curious. Ling Han shook his head, and said, I can't describe why. I keep feeling that this brat is extremely evil, making me have the urge to thrash him. Therefore, it's best if this brat does not appear before me again, or I will definitely have fun thrashing him. How willful. Thrash him. Hit him. Who knew waved her little hands too. You guys. Lu Yutong was completely speechless. Why would Ling Han dislike Yan Tianzhao? Could it be because I doted on him too much, so this guy is jealous? When she thought of this, Lu Yutong's heart could not help beating wildly. Since you don't like it, then I won't see him again, she said, tugging at her sleeve. A beautiful blush rose up on her face, giving her a very tempting look. Was this girl misunderstanding something? But never mind, as long as she did not come into contact with Yan Tianzhao again, that would be fine. Though this brat did not have a single bit of power in him, Ling Han still felt he was really too strange. And if his deductions were not wrong and Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma because of something someone else did, then perhaps it was because someone had discovered his evil nature, yet could not bear to kill a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and so merely caused him to fall into a coma. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 163. Jin Wuji's Request. After returning to the Huyang Academy, Ling Han and Lu Yutong both went their own way. He had just stepped into his own courtyard when he immediately heard Lu Rue's nagging voice. As a landlord, you are really a failure. You did not even prepare food for us. She seethed. Ling Han could not help a strange expression appearing on his face as he asked, Don't tell me you two don't know how to cook. Instantly, Lu Rue's almond-shaped eyes widened, and she blurted out, How did you know? I can easily tell from looks of your incompetence, Ling Han sighed. This pair of assassin sisters were really failures. They failed at assassination and did not even know how to cook. They really were the rookies of all rookies. Heng, who are you calling incompetent? Lu Rue asked with a defiant expression. When I have recovered all my abilities, I will definitely give you a good thrashing. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, Then why should I still continue to care for two enemies like you two? I've been short of money recently, and if I take advantage of the chance to provide information on two criminals, I should be able to get quite a considerable sum of money. Lu Rue instantly paled and gasped in fear. You're just scaring me. Am I? Ling Han crossed one leg over the other, an unfathomable expression on his face. Lu Rue wavered. She had always been living under the protection of her elder sister and never needed to worry about the bad intentions of others. Now that she was facing Ling Han, who was in his second lifetime on her own, she was naturally easily played by him. Come, sing a little song for me. If you sing well enough, then I'll let you off, Ling Han said, smiling. Lu Rue finally understood that Ling Han was just trying to scare her and could not help patting her breasts as she said, You're so mean. But, she immediately raised her head and added, All right, then I'll sing a song. But, don't think that I'm afraid of you. It's just been too long since I last sang, and I feel an itch in my throat. She opened her mouth and began singing. The song she sang was mellow, and would easily touch the hearts of listeners. Ling Han nodded internally. This little girl was a bit of a ditz, but she was indeed quite a talented singer. Looks like she went into the wrong business. Noisy. Who knew was awakened by the song and glared in displeasure at Lu Rue, her ferocious nature fully out in the open. Lu Rue was not very happy with her critique and said, I have such a beautiful voice, and you actually say it's noisy. There is indeed no hint of elegance in you. Heng, who knew, glared at her in defiance. The two girls glared furiously at one another, neither willing to back down. From the looks of it, they were prepared to glare at each other until the end of time. Ling Han yawned, stood up and walked to his bedroom, intending to go to bed. Xiu, who knew, immediately took a great leap and clung onto Ling Han. Then, she turned and made a silly face at Lu Rue. Such a failure. She couldn't even handle a little kid. Lu Rue clutched her hair in frustration. As an assassin, she couldn't even win in a staring competition with a little girl. Was she really suited to become an assassin? When he awoke, there was a shade of pale white in the eastern sky. Ling Han sat up in a cross-legged position and began to cultivate. He was deliberately waking up earlier now to cultivate at a different time from who knew. This way, he would not need to run all over the place to cultivate elsewhere. Not bad. I'll be able to break through to the 8th layer of element gathering tier in 3 days. Ling Han smiled. What he wanted the most now was to break through to Gushing Spring tier and peer into the secrets of the Black Tower. By now, the sun had already risen and Ling Han woke Hu Niu up. Though the little girl looked very reluctant, she still adhered to Ling Han's request and began to cultivate. Hu Niu had such a terrifying potential, who knows, her future achievements may not be one bit beneath his. Ling Han prepared breakfast. He was extremely depressed at this. It was fine when he had Hu Niu staying with him, but now that there were 2 bigger girls living with him, it was still up to him to cook. This was really unfair. Tong, tong, tong. A knock sounded on the main door. Who could it be? Ling Han walked over, opened the door and discovered that his visitor was Jin Wuji. Yi, why did this guy come over? Brother Jin, why are you here so early? Ling Han asked, smiling. Jin Wuji smiled bitterly, and said, Brother Ling, I would like to ask for your help. With what? Ling Han asked, in no rush to agree to anything yet. Jin Wuji hesitated for a moment, then asked, is Brother Ling able to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion? Yi. Ling Han could not help but look at Jin Wuji strangely. Had this guy struck some deal with Lady Yan? Ling Han had just received the Cherishing Flower command yesterday and there was already someone here today to ask for his help to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Brother Ling, I don't know what else to do. You know a lot of people, and I'm desperate. That's why I am here to shamelessly ask for your help, Jin Wuji sighed. Ling Han smiled, and asked, what's going on? Why would you need a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion? If I tell you, promise me you won't laugh at me. Jin Wuji actually blushed. Ling Han put on a serious face, and said, I promise I won't laugh. Jin Wuji gathered his thoughts for a moment, then began to speak. Apparently, he met a daughter of a minor clan from the Imperial City a year ago. Her name was Jiang Fei Yan, and the 2 of them had fallen in love with each other. Their relationship had even reached the point that they were beginning to discuss marriage. However, though the Jin clan was a great clan in Dayuan City, it was only considered a minor clan in the Imperial City. Moreover, those who were living in an area under the direct jurisdiction of the Emperor all had an inborn arrogance and felt a sense of superiority towards others. The Jiang clan was thus not very satisfied with a future son-in-law like Jin Wuji and kept trying to separate the couple. Thus, Jin Wuji kept trying to rack his brains, hoping to find some way to change the opinion the Jiang clan had of him. The requirements to enter the Cherishing Flower Pavilion were very high and anyone who wanted to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion had to at least be from a middle-class clan. Thus, displaying his ability through treating the important members of the Jiang clan to a meal at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was undoubtedly a very good idea. But the problem now was that even if he had broken through to Gushing Spring tier, the Cherishing Flower Pavilion would still ignore his request, what more now that he was still only in Element Gathering tier. Recently, the Jiang clan appeared to plan on marrying Jiang Fei Yan off to the 7th young master of a middle-class clan. Thus, Jin Wuji really had no idea what else he could do and so came to try his luck with Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just arrived at the Imperial City for a few days and had already gotten to know a disciple of Wu Songling, and could even possibly be an honored guest of Grandmaster Wu. Therefore, even if Ling Han had no way to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion by himself, he could still go through Wu Songlin to make the reservation. When he heard the full story, Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly as he said, I had never imagined that Brother Jin would actually be a romantic. Brother Ling, you promised you wouldn't laugh. Meanwhile, Jin Wuji was continuously sighing, distress all over his face. Ling Han still continued to laugh. He patted Jin Wuji on his shoulder and said, "Brother Jin, I am not able to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but—" When Jin Wuji heard his words, he looked disappointed at first. But then, he suddenly heard that meaningful pause, so his heart involuntarily started to beat wildly in excitement. "Does Brother Ling have some other way? I can't reserve a regular table, but would a side courtyard be all right?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "Pooh." Jin Wuji instantly choked. If one wanted to reserve a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion, then one definitely had to have the cultivation level of Spiritual Ocean Tier and above, or be backed by a Spiritual Ocean Tier elite. For example, the members of the main branch of middle-class clans were able to make a reservation. However, they still needed to make the reservation in advance, because the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was really too good. If they did not make the reservation well in advance, they would not be able to get a table. And in the case of side courtyards, one would at least require the cultivation level of Spiritual Pedestal Tier or the backing of a Spiritual Pedestal Tier elite to be able to make a reservation for a side courtyard. "Brother Ling, you're not joking with me, are you?" This surprise was huge, leaving Jin Wuji stuttering in his words. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 164, Snobbish Relatives. "Don't worry." Ling Han laughed and asked, "When do you intend to treat Miss Zhang's family members? When is the earliest possible time you can get a reservation, Brother Ling?" Jin Wuji asked in return. He naturally wanted it to be done as soon as possible. Ling Han spread his hands, and answered, "Whichever day is fine for me. If you're in a rush, I can get one even tonight." "Even tonight?" Jin Wuji's heartbeat sped up a bit more. What kind of concept was that? Members of the 8 great clans as well as the imperial family of course had the ability to reserve a side courtyard at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but, even they would not be able to go there at the drop of a hat. Even these extremely important people had to make reservations well in advance. Only a very rare few had the special privilege to make use of a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion without making any reservations in advance. The Cherishing Flower Pavilion had the practice of setting apart a few side courtyards that were specifically for such emergencies and could be used without any reservations at all. For example, the third Imperial Prince was one who had this special privilege. But, who was the third Imperial Prince? He was a genius of martial arts on his own, with a cultivation level of the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, also one of the heirs to the throne. In the future, he would definitely become a very powerful person. But what about Ling Han, then? Could it be that he also had this kind of special privilege? Jin Wuji was really astonished. He knew that Ling Han was a monster who had charged out like a dark horse to take the first place in the Da Yuan tournament, and had even managed to obtain the full support of 3 black-grade low-level alchemists. But that was only in Da Yuan City. This was the Imperial City. Ling Han had just been here for a few days, and he was already so high up on the social ladder. To compare yourself with others would indeed drive one crazy. Jin Wuji could not help but sigh internally. He had been in the Imperial City for more than 3 years, but aside from the significant increase of his cultivation level, there was not even one bit of increase to his personal status. If he compared himself with Ling Han, he would really die of embarrassment. He had no suspicions that Ling Han was just bluffing. Ling Han could be a joker at times, but he would never make unrealistic boasts on matters like this. "Tonight, then," Jin Wuji said, barely able to hide the excitement on his face. For a minor clan like the Jiang clan, they wouldn't even be able to step through the main doors of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, what more to have a meal at one of the side courtyards within. After this night, what need would there be for him to still fear that the Jiang clan would continue to look down on him and object to his and Jiang Feiyan's marriage? "All right," Ling Han nodded. "Thank you, Brother Ling. Thank you, Brother Ling." Jin Wuji bowed repeatedly, obviously very excited. He secretly decided that no matter what favors Ling Han needed from him in the future, he would do everything in his might to help him. He turned and left. It was naturally to inform the Jiang clan about the dinner tonight. This was something he should be very proud of to announce. Meanwhile, Ling Han remained in his courtyard, immersing himself in comprehending the art of the sword. He had reached a bottleneck and had been stuck on mere 6 flashes of sword chi for a very long time. Yet, somehow he had still not managed to break through and form the 7th flash of sword chi. In truth, even if it was an extremely capable swordsman, it was already very impressive to be able to form a single flash of sword chi in 10 years' time. Moreover, the more flashes of sword chi one managed to form, the more they would slow down in their advance. By the time a swordsman got to be about 100 years old, if he had managed to form 10 flashes of sword chi, he would be praised as a genius of martial arts. However, Ling Han was not satisfied. His starting point was well ahead of all others, so naturally he could not compare himself with the normal rate of advance. Previously, he had spent a lot of time on discussions of the art of the sword with Mo Gao. Mo Gao was a mad genius who had actually managed to touch a sliver of the mysteries of sword art and had given Ling Han a lot of inspiration. On the spot, Ling Han had managed to form his 6th flash of sword chi. However, this had also expended all the accumulated understanding he had built up, so it would be indeed difficult for him to advance another step forward in a short period of time. Ling Han sat in a cross-legged position, holding his right index finger out as if it was a sword he was wielding. He continued to wave his finger around in various sword movements, examining the art of the sword that he had managed to comprehend so far in his mind. Before he knew it, it was already noon. He stopped and got up to prepare food for Hu Niu. The food for himself and the Lu sisters was just cooked in passing. It would be an accomplishment enough if they even managed to finish off 1/100th of the food that he had prepared. He spent the afternoon on his studies of the art of the sword. For Ling Han, there was nothing much that the academy could teach him. Before he came, he had already decided that the primary purpose he was here was just to make Ling Dongxing happy. However, the path he was meant to walk in the future had already been well planned in advance by him. In the evening, he brought Hu Niu along with him to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. He merely flashed the Cherishing Flower command, and automatically, there were female attendants leading him to an elegant side courtyard and inquiring him about the dishes and wines to be served for the dinner tonight. The appetizers were served first. When Hu Niu saw them, she could not help but feel her appetite stirred up and failed to hold back from stealing a few bites, causing the 8 female attendants serving them to cover their mouths as they smiled secretly. Ling Han would naturally not reprimand her either. After all, he was not short of money now. If she finished off a plate, then he'd just have another plate served. After about half an hour, a company of 8 walked in, led by a female attendant. Aside from Jin Wuji, the other 7 people of this party was naturally the members of the Jiang clan. They included Jiang Fei Yan and her parents, as well as her 2 aunts and their 2 sons. So this is a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. It's really too beautiful. In the past, we only managed to get into the ordinary rooms of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Looks like Fei Yan has really found the right guy this time. He can even manage to make a reservation for a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Yes, yes. I heard that only members of the 8 great clans and the imperial family have the ability to reserve a side courtyard here. Then wouldn't that mean that we are at the same level as the 8 great clans and the imperial family now? The older members of the Jiang clan were all looking very excited. As a minor clan, they did not have much to worry about. The only thing they lacked was advancement in their social status and recognition of their status. Merely having dinner here tonight would be enough for them to boast for the rest of their lives. Do you have any souvenirs here that I can attach to my clothes? Eldest aunt immediately asked one of the female attendants. If there were, then she would definitely attach it to her clothes every day and would show it to everyone she met. The female attendant stared blankly. Those who were able to come here to spend money were naturally of extremely high status, so she had never been asked such a question by anyone else before. She could not help but be stunned for a moment, before replying, "We don't." "How could you not have any?" Youngest aunt also leaned over. "Why not you ask someone to prepare one for us?" That's right. That's right. Prepare one, eldest aunt said hurriedly. When they heard the words of these two senior relatives, Jin Wuji and Jiang Fei Yan both blushed to the roots of their hair, feeling unbearably ashamed. Meanwhile, those two cousins of Jiang Fei Yan kept staring pervertedly at the faces and breasts of the female attendants with deep focus. Brother Jin. Ling Han stood and waved at Jin Wuji. Brother Ling. Jin Wuji returned the gesture, filled with gratitude. Ha ha. Thank you very much, Brother Jin. Thanks to you, I can also enjoy a meal at this cherishing flower pavilion for once, Ling Han said, smiling. Jin Wuji knew that Ling Han was trying to put him in a high position. He could not help feeling very touched by the action, and only nodded repeatedly. Ling Han smiled. Though there had been a little conflict between himself and Jin Wuji and Jin Wuxiang, Jin Wuji had already apologized long ago, so everything was forgotten. And afterwards, Jin Wuji purposely forfeited his match at the Da Yuan tournament, and even brought his own people to help rescue Ling Dongxing. Whether or not Ling Han had needed it, all these were debts that Ling Han owed. Debts would naturally have to be repaid, so Ling Han was very willing to act as a minor role to cast a better light on Jin Wuji. You naturally have to thank our Wuji. Eldest aunt wore a very despising expression, looking very disdainful. I heard that you are a friend of Wuji's from the Da Yuan city. You are indeed a country bumpkin that doesn't know the rules of proper society. It was already nice enough to invite you to dinner, and you actually brought a little girl along with you. Jin Wuji's expression changed immediately, and he was about to speak up. Yet when he saw Ling Han shake his head at him, he could only swallow the urge down. Ling Han did not take the words of eldest aunt to heart at all. They went in one ear and out the other. What need was there for him to take such a vulgar person seriously? After all, they would only be meeting this once. In the future, he would not see these people again. Thankfully, the members of the Jiang clan were all mesmerized by the new sights they saw, since it was their first time entering into a side courtyard of the cherishing flower pavilion. When the dishes were served one after another, as smoothly as the flow of water, they could not bother with displaying disdain for Ling Han any longer and began enjoying the food. One of the female attendants suddenly exclaimed in shock, pointed at the Jiang Fei Yan's eldest cousin, and said, he touched my bottom. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 165, Guess whom we saw? Why are you making such a fuss? You have a tiger's bottom, is it that I can't even touch? Zhang Hualian, the eldest cousin, humphed, looking very displeased. After all, touching someone else's bottom was a very lowly thing to do. Even he, who thought himself a Casanova, would not want to be exposed for doing such a thing in such a public venue. Aren't you going to apologize to my cousin? Tong Yuan, the second cousin, spoke up as well, arrogance all over his face. We're the most honored customers of your cherishing flower pavilion. Do you know who honored customers are? Those who are able to enter into a side courtyard are all in the ranks of spiritual pedestal tier elites. One word from us, and your whole family would be dead. The female attendant looked both angry and embarrassed. However, she was only a female attendant with little power. It was obviously she who had experienced a loss, yet now, according to them, it was also she who was in the wrong. The two aunts looked on indifferently. In their eyes, a mere female attendant was naturally not worth even a single hair off the heads of their sons. So what if their son touched her bottom? She wouldn't lose a pound of flesh anyway. Moreover, weren't the women here all selling their bodies? What was the point in acting all noble now? Eldest cousin, second cousin, just let it go. Jiang Fei Yan spoke up. As a woman, she was naturally sympathizing with the female attendant. However, the one who had taken advantage was her own cousin. She couldn't possibly help outsiders against her own family members, right? Fei Yan, you were going to be a bride of a major clan in future, and going to have a very noble status. There is no need for you to sympathize with these little bastard. Eldest aunt immediately said to Jiang Fei Yan in a lecturing tone. That's right, Fei Yan. You can't be too kind. As the matriarch of a major clan, you must learn to be ruthless in your ways, youngest aunt continued. Both Jiang Fei Yan's own parents remained silent, however. From the looks of it, both her parents did not have much of a voice within the Jiang clan. Instead, they couldn't even compare with these two daughters who had married outside the clan. The truth was indeed so. The current clan head of the Jiang clan was Jiang Fei Yan's grandmother, and she very much doted on these two daughters of hers who had married outside the clan because they had both managed to marry well. Both their husbands were members of middle-class clans. Though their husbands were not very important in their own clans, they still benefited from the protection and influence of their clans. Naturally, they were very confident in front of their relatives who were only members of a minor clan. Every time they returned to their parents' home, they would strut around in front of their siblings. As time passed, Jiang Fei Yan's parents spoke less, allowing these two aunts to speak as much as they liked. This time, the plans to marry Jiang Fei Yan off to a middle-class clan was naturally the handiwork of these two aunts. In their eyes, this was naturally all for Jiang Fei Yan's own good. However, Jin Wuji suddenly transformed to become so awesome that he could even manage to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. The attitudes of these two aunts naturally changed, and they began to mend their relationship with Jiang Fei Yan's father, intending to get to a higher position through the help of Jin Wuji in the future. The female attendant was already crying from the harsh words of these two aunts. Unfortunately, the Cherishing Flower Pavilion had its own rules. She did not dare to cover up her face and leave it all. Zhang Hualian saw this and became even bolder as he said, "Come and sit beside me. Accompany me for a cup of wine." HMPH. Ling Han stood up. He knew that the members of the Jiang clan were snobbish and overbearing, yet had never thought that even two juniors would behave so lecherously out in the open. He approached that female attendant, handed her a monetary note, and said, "I am really sorry. This is a small token from me. Though it cannot compensate for the wounds to your self-esteem, but please accept it." That female attendant took one look at the monetary note, and paled in shock. It was a monetary note worth 10,000 silver coins. One had to understand that she was only a female attendant who had a cultivation level of the 7th layer of body refining tier. The most she could earn in a single month would be about 300 silver coins. Though this was also quite a considerable sum of money, when compared with the colossal amount of 10,000, there was indeed a huge difference. "Mister, I do not dare accept," she said, blushing. "Just accept it," Ling Han said, smiling. He waved his hand and said, "We do not need your service here anymore. All of you may leave." "Yes, mister." The 8 female attendants all bowed in response. They naturally were well aware that the real boss here was Ling Han, and they all looked at Ling Han with gratitude in their eyes. When their eyes swept over the few members of the Jiang clan, their gazes were filled with strong disdain and despise. "Who allowed you to leave? All of you are to stay here." Zhang Hualian immediately called out. "That's right. How dare you leave?" Tong Yuan even stood up, and from the look of him, he was planning to stop them from leaving. Jin Wuji hurriedly stood as well and pushed Tong Yuan back into his seat as he said, "Second cousin, forget about it." He was aware that Ling Han was already displeased. If Tong Yuan dared to step forward and make trouble, Ling Han would most likely fly into a rage on the spot. Those two aunts of the Jiang clan were also about to explode, but when they saw that Jin Wuji had spoken up to settle the issue, they could only push down their anger. They did not dare offend Jin Wuji now. After all, he was a man who could manage to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. "Wuji, youngest aunt is not really trying to reprimand you. However, your kindness to your friends is because of your own loyalty to friends, but friends would still be outsiders. How could they be as dependable as your own people?" Youngest aunt pursed her lips, targeting Ling Han with her words. "That's right. Just take a look. You kindly invited your friend over to broaden his horizons, and what does he do? He actually brought a filthy little girl with him. She looks like she has not eaten anything in her entire life. How embarrassing. My advice is, it's best to break off the friendship with such a person. Eldest aunt said as well. The two had not spoken in very low voices, obviously deliberately loud enough for Ling Han to hear their words. Jin Wuji received a horrible scare. Break off the friendship with such a person. If he did not have the friendship with such a person, how would you all be able to sit here to enjoy dinner tonight? He stole a look at Ling Han, and when he saw that Ling Han did not appear to be angry, he was greatly relieved. Still, he did not dare to allow these two shrews to continue with their words, and quickly said, "Come, come, come. Everyone, please enjoy your drinks and food. Uncle, auntie, please allow me to offer you a drink." He raised his head directly, and drained his cup. Ling Han knew that Jin Wuji was making his apologies in this way. He smiled calmly. Tonight's dinner was to repay Jin Wuji's previous favors to him, so he would naturally not easily be angered. All would depend on whether those two aunts of the Jiang clan continued to seek their deaths. After a few rounds of wine, they were all a bit tipsy. Eldest aunt stood up, and said to youngest aunt, "We have never been to a side courtyard before. Let's go stroll around. Who knows, we might meet with some important people. If we manage to befriend them, then we'd flourish in the future." Right. Youngest aunt hurriedly stood up as well. This pair of snobbish sisters leaned on each other and made their way out. However, after only a few moments, they returned, and it was as if their faces were shining. "Guess whom we saw just now?" Without waiting for an answer, they both quickly answered their own question. "Grandmaster Yuanchu Yuan. Do you all know who Grandmaster Yuanchu is? A black-grade middle-level alchemist. His status is high enough to scare all of you to death." The members of the Jiang clan did indeed receive a scare. That was a black-grade middle-level alchemist they were talking about. A being like that was like a mountain to them, someone that they could only look up to. "Hua Lian, Yuana, come with me, quick. Let's go and greet Grandmaster Yuanchu. Who knows, when Grandmaster Yuanchu is happy, he'd decide to concoct a few furnaces worth of alchemical pills for us. By that time, it would be very easy for the two of you to break through to element gathering tier," eldest aunt said excitedly. That was why the two of them had returned in such a hurry. That would not be appropriate, would it? Grandmaster Yuanchu is a very noble status. If we so rashly disturb him, it may possibly anger Grandmaster Yuanchu, Jin Wuji said immediately. Ling Han did not get angry for his sake, but who was Grandmaster Yuanchu? There was no way that he would give face to Jin Wuji, and definitely not to the Jiang clan. We are now high up on the social ladder as well. We're just asking for a few furnaces worth of pills. Youngest aunt said calmly. You two are fucking idiots. Jin Wuji cursed internally. He suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge to rush forward and slap these two silly. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.